Hi and welcome back to Classic Vinyl Top 10s, and today we're counting down from 20 to number 11 in my favourite albums of all time, GOAT. Just to remind you, it's one album per artist on this list, one album per artist. This group of 10 albums covers the period 64 to 1997 and includes 3 debut albums. Okay, so let's get started. Coming in at number 20, a 1985 album, their 8th studio album. The Guardian described this as the band being on the edge of mainstream, which I wholeheartedly agree. They never quite crossed over, but they did have top 40 hit singles. And this is the wonderful The Fall, This Nation's Saving Grace. I think what changed with The Fall was Mark Smith meeting Brick Smith, who joined the band and Mark's life, and she played lead guitar riffs as bass lines effectively. The Hanley brothers left just before recording, but as with The Fall, there was a high turnover and the guys came back every now and again, I think. This only got to number 54 in the UK. John Leckie produced. I particularly love Cruisers Creek. The drum sound on Cruisers Creek, Mark Smith's melody, I do use the word loosely, melody, on Cruisers, but other tracks on here that were fantastic: Mansion, Bombast, Barmy, LA, Gutter the Quantifier, My New House, I Am Damo Suzuki, about the Can singer, Paintwork, Craig Scanlon, Mark Smith, Simon Rogers, Steve Hanley recorded some stuff, I think, before he left. Carl Burns on drums, Bricks on lead and backing vocals. And just adding the backing vocals and the more commercial rhythm guitar stuff just changed this album, or changed The Fall's direction for a short period. Anyway, Nation's Saving Grace, This Nation's Saving Grace, fantastic. More middle of the road, but it isn't a middle of the road record. This is George Michael's Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1. So much better in my opinion than Faith. This was the follow-up album from 1990. David Fincher produced that Freedom 90 MTV video with all the models, etc. Listen with Prejudice Volume 2 was meant, but was scrapped, unfortunately. Anyway, stuff that I love about this: Praying for Time's great. Cowboys and Angels is, to me, the standout track. The smoky jazz feel of it, and the wonderful, breathy sax solo on here. Heal the Pain, Mother's Pride, Waiting for the Day. Yep. Classy, sophisticated, the best of George Michael. 1978 we go to next for number 18 on my GOAT list. I remember hearing this, a friend played this to me at school. I think we went back to his house or something, and he produced this. I think his elder brother had heard it from the States, and it knocked us out, or it certainly knocked me out. The guitar work, couldn't believe it. And they were financed in the early days by Gene Simmons from Kiss, and introduced us to Eddie Van Halen's Brown Sound. This is Van Halen, the debut album. Amazing piece of work. Not, I suspect, probably not so popular with our incumbent metal fans at the time. It certainly wasn't in the mould of Sabbath or Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin or anything like that. This was American. It was smooth. There were no real rough edges, but it had in Eddie just the most amazing guitarist. There were Hendrix comparisons, although I think they're completely different players. But the two Van Halen brothers made it for me. Many people argue about Roth, but he certainly added something live, even if his vocals weren't always up to scratch. Ted Templeman produced, only got to 34 in the UK and only 19 in the US. But Van Halen, debut album, fantastic, something new. Okay, where are we going now? 1972, a few years earlier, an album that's often on these lists, so apologies, but you can't leave out Harvest by Neil Young. This was his fourth studio album, 1972. Track listing includes Man Needs a Maid, Heart of Gold, Old Man, Alabama, Needle in the Damage Done, amongst others. And as I understand it, the drummer only used snare and a kick all the way through this album. I haven't listened for that, but that's what I read somewhere, so fascinating. Anyway, 1972, Neil Young, Harvest. Could have been, it'll come back to me. Age, it gets you, doesn't it? What's the, yeah, I'll come back to it. Maybe. I'll probably scribble it in as soon as I remember it afterwards. Anyway, number 16, an underrated band. Doesn't often make these lists, but they've got a superb catalogue of work, going from Irish, Celtic sounds to this, which is probably the last of their big music sound. Huge, epic soundscape, starting from the very beginning. This is the Sea by the Waterboys. Don't Bang the Drum, fantastic opening trumpet, and comes in with a crushing drum sound. Produced by Mike Scott and Mick Glossop, mostly, and it had the three of them that were really the core of Waterboys. Mike Scott, vocals, guitar, piano. Anthony Thistlethwaite, brilliant sax player, knew when to play, knew when not to play. And Carl Wallinger, this was the last album he was on before he set up World Party, and he unfortunately is no longer with us. Don't Bang the Drum, The Whole of the Moon's on here, which I think most people know. Medicine Bow, Old England, Be My Enemy, Trumpets is beautiful. Pan Within, Spirit, fantastic. Yeah, if you haven't heard the Waterboys and all you've heard of is Whole of the Moon, the Waterboys are not the Whole of the Moon. It is just a tiny part of the Waterboys' journey. I would listen to this, but all the early albums, fantastic. The Waterboys, in at 16. In at 15, probably my favourite indie album of all time. A four-piece from Birmingham. This is the 1981 debut album from the Au Pairs. This is Playing with a Different Sex, a John Peel favourite. They were banned, I think, by the Beeb for their track Come Again, but that still didn't push them into the mainstream, unfortunately. Oh, well, fortunately. We're So Cool, Love Song, Set Up, Repetition. Oh, Headache for Me, Shell, the drums on that. Pete Hammond's drums on that, fantastic. Come Again, Armagh, Unfinished Business, Dear John, It's Obvious, and covering themes that weren't often covered in songs at that time, including a lot to do with the Irish troubles, sex problems, relationship problems, and I think Bowie later recorded Repetition, the Au Pairs song from this album, on, what would that have been on? It's probably on Let's Dance. Might be wrong. Again, I'll put it in the drivel underneath if I'm wrong with that. But yeah, the Au Pairs. If you haven't heard the Au Pairs and you like indie, yeah, think of the Gang of Four, sure, but this, in my opinion, far superior. Great four-piece. In at 14, a very popular album. I won't bang on about it too much. OK Computer by Radiohead, 1997, third studio album, moving from the more guitar-based The Bends starting their experimental stuff, really. Most was recorded live, I understand, and covering all sorts of themes, anti-capitalism, social situations, but just some superb tracks. Karma Police, No Surprises, Airbag, Paranoid, Android, etc., etc. This could have been in Rainbows, could have been the Bends. I chose this in the end. Yeah, say no more. Radiohead. 1988. Now, I haven't seen a single list where this album's in it, let alone the band. But to me, they're off on the side, off a tangent from the Waterboys, maybe. They're an Irish band. First time I saw them was an HMV away weekend in Killarney, where they played live for us. And I loved it. And I remember at the time the record company were promoting them as the next U2, and they certainly are not the next U2. Yep, Irish roots, sure, but they are not the next U2. Completely different band, a more authentic band in many ways. This is Hothouse Flowers and People. It was at the time the most successful album in Irish history. 1988 debut album. Some of the singles I think went top 40. I'm Sorry, Don't Go. I think those were probably the two. But there's a fantastic ballad on here, If You Go. The band included Jerry Fahey on drums, Leo Barnes playing some beautiful sax on here. And the main two guys were Liam and the chap whose name I can't pronounce because I apologise to the Irish, Fiachna. I'm sure it ain't Fiachna, but anyway, Hothouse Flowers, superb album, hugely underrated, not a bad track on here. Okay, going to number 12 now, 1964 album. Yep, you all know this, the Beatles. I love If I Fell and I Love Her. I think those two, the more mellow stuff on here. Third studio album, all the songs listed as written by Lennon and McCartney, but the majority were written by Lennon on this album. Part soundtrack to A Hard Day's Night film. The Beatles, it could have been Rubber Soul, it could have been Help. I certainly preferred the more commercial early stuff actually, rather than White Album, but there you go. And then finally on this section, number 11, one of my favourite bands. They seem to get more popular with age. They make albums, they write, they make albums, they tour, they write, they make albums, they tour. Somebody dies, they write albums, they tour, somebody else dies. And if you get to see them, they were at Wembley a few months back. Fantastic gig, classic DC. This is AC/DC, Let There Be Rock. Again, this could have been quite a number of AC/DC albums, but I chose it over Back in Black and Power Age. It's the first to use the iconic AC/DC logo, apparently, and they were about to be dropped from their US label, if you can believe that, because Dirty Deeds hadn't done so well. And then they bring out this. And it's got Let There Be Rock on it, obviously, and Whole Lot of Rosie, just for two. But I love Problem Child, I love Overdose, Hell Ain't in a Bad Place, Go Down, Dog Eat Dog, Bad Boy Boogie. Fantastic stuff. If you've ever seen a schoolboy with white hair, yeah, that's AC/DC on tour these days. But fantastic shows. So AC/DC at 11, 1977. So that's it. That's 20 down to 11, which means there's only one more session to come. If you like this sort of stuff, please click the like button. And if you can subscribe, even better, to make sure you at least see the top 10. And this top 10 is going to be interesting. I guarantee it'll be interesting. It isn't your typical top 10. And it covers a wider period of time, actually, than the 10 we've just done. Anyway, I hope to see you again. This is Classic Vinyl Top 10s. Thanks ever so much for watching. Cheers. Bye.